What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are here with the conclusion of Darkseid War. As always, if you need to get caught up, you will find a link to the playlist down in the description and at the end of the video. So, what this does is this picks up with Lex Luthor, who now has the power of Darkseid, and has had it for a little while, but he's finally shown up on the battlefield to face off against the Anti-Monitor. And Lois Lane says, Lex Luthor used to be envious of Clark's power, but the power of gods has exchanged hands. And she says, Darkseid is dead. The being that killed Darkseid is named Mobius. He is older than Zeus, crueler than Ares, driven to burn our world for the sheer pleasure of it. And that's where Superwoman, right? This is Lois Lane from Earth 3. It's just like, the baby is coming. Now, there's a caveat to this, and it's kind of a huge caveat that happens during the events of Darkseid War. But Lex chimes in and he says, that's your problem, Diana. All of you. You think you need a league to get things done. You have no idea how to use your power. And Wonder Woman comes back in with this monologue and she says, Lex has absorbed some of Darkseid's power and is controlling his army of parademons. I'd say his mind is clouded like the minds of Barry, Bruce, and the others infected by the gods. But in moments of perceived strength, men like Lex become arrogant. It's only in moments of weakness and vulnerability that men like him see the truth. And the truth, we will never survive this by working apart. And that's when the crime syndicate comes to Wonder Woman, but not as allies, to actually chase her off, because they say, move away from Superwoman before we decide to focus our desire for revenge on you instead of Mobius. And where she initially says, right, like, you guys agreed to help, Jessica says, we agreed to help destroy that monster, princess, nothing more, which is true. The crime syndicate agreed to help the Justice League because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but it is a tenuous alliance at best. But that's where Grid comes in, right? Earth 3's version of Cyborg, and says, delivery is imminent, Owlman. The Messiah comes. And so that's why Owlman chimes back in and he says, wasn't I clear, Wonder Woman? Get away. And that's where Diana just says, she's about to give birth. We have to get Superwoman somewhere safe, away from Mobius. And that's when Owlman essentially tells her, you have no clue what's going on here. You don't understand the significance of all of this. He's like, away from him, we're not going anywhere. That's the entire point. She is giving birth to the Messiah. And I will say this, the baby she gives birth to is cracked. It's so overpowered. So what ends up happening is Wonder Woman says, Superwoman screams and every piece of glass in Gotham shatters. The earth cracks beneath us and Owlman waits while Mobius fights his way towards Batman. He wants the chair back and we don't know why. Now that's a cool thing, right? Because the Mobius chair was created by Mobius. It is a source of information, right? It knows everything that's happening right now and everything that's ever happened over the course of the universe that's been observed by Metron when he occupied the chair, which essentially is literally everything, right? Metron was like DC's watcher. But the true machinations of the chair, its true power, is lost. It's unknown. And so that's when you have Lex and Anti-Monitor facing off against each other. And the Monitor just says, stand aside, Lex Luthor, and I will burn you from existence quickly. You cannot protect the League from me for long. My shadow demons, and that's where Lex says, they're being burned away, consumed by the Omega effect. But my army, and that's where the Anti-Monitor says the parademons, they die, but they do not fear it. No pain, no emotion, like killing universes from afar. It is utterly unsatisfying. I thirst for suffering. And that's where Lex is like, then I'll oblige, and just like attacks the Anti-Monitor. It's amazing. But these two guys are at a standstill. Their power is essentially equal. And so at that point, you jump back to Batman occupying the Mobius chair, and he says, you told us that there was a way to stop Mobius, that you would tell us when it was time. I would say this qualifies. And that's where Owlman just says, yes, we have a weapon that can kill him. And the question is, what weapon? But Batman has the Mobius chair. The Mobius chair gives him answers, in addition to telepathy, reading the minds of the people around him. And that's when he says, the chair knows, Diana. That's why Mobius wants it. He wants to learn the secret to this weapon that Owlman is referring to, the baby. So in the moment, the entire reason for Anti-Monitor wanting the chair is just self-preservation. But again, the entire theme here is when he told Batman, you do not understand the chair's true purpose. And so in that moment, Jessica Cruz chimes in and she says, so you know, that's fine. Once the child is born, we will take care of Mobius and then you. And so that's why she just says, hurry up and get it out already, Superwoman. We do not have all day. The crime syndicate, besides being a team, if we're being honest with ourselves, are very similar to like the Seven from the Boys mythos, right? Yes, they're a team, but they don't really like each other very much, right? It's really just kind of the grand pursuit of power that unified them in the first place. But here's the other thing too, right? Superwoman kind of gets around in Earth 3 because there was a point when we initially learned about her and the idea that she was pregnant, we thought that it was either Ultraman's kid or Owlman's kid. And it turns out it's not the child of either, because what she says is, she says, Owlman, Thomas, it's not yours. And he's like, I know that. And she just says, don't hurt my baby. And he's like, hurt it? No, I need it. And so then you switch over to Jessica Cruz, right? Now keep in mind, Volthoom, basically Power Ring from Earth 3, he's the one controlling Jessica, so she doesn't really have control of herself, but she is there. And she says, I can see through Volthoom's eyes. He is in my body, and Grid's there in yours. And she just says, God, I hope this works. Because what we end up learning is that when Cyborg initially tried to shut down the ring of Volthoom and essentially had his consciousness replaced with Grid, right? Cyborg from Earth 3, there was actually more to it than that. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of fans of Cyborg will tell you he's incredibly slept on in DC Comics. He doesn't quite get his respect, which is fair. The guy's the security guard for the Justice League Watchtower. But outside of that, like, people just don't respect Cyborg. But honestly, man, when it comes down to it, bro, Victor Stone is the guy you want in your corner, man. This dude can get the Justice League out of some really tight spots, in addition to just shouting booyah all the time. But the thing about this is that when she punctures through what's basically this kind of barrier that keeps Jessica Cruz's consciousness locked away inside the Power Ring, she meets Cyborg, Victor Stone's consciousness. And she asks, right, what happened to you? You look good. And he says, it's only a projection. And so then she asks, how did you get stuck in the ring with me? And that's when he says, when I connected with the ring, I downloaded my consciousness into it. And she asks why, and he says, maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am. I thought I could help get you back in the driver's seat, but this alien tech is taking longer to decipher than I thought it would. He's hacking the ring, which is one of the coolest things. He's hacking a Green Lantern ring, which is dope. And so at that point, you jump back to Lex and you jump back to the Anti-Monitor. Now, you guys have all heard the infamous phrase, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's what Lex Luthor is contending with. He's arguably the smartest man in the DC universe, but even the smartest people in the world are not beyond the influence of extreme levels of power. And so that's why he says, you've given me an experience I never imagined possible, the death of a god at my hands. And he says, then Superman, yes, I am Darkseid. And then he corrects himself, right? I am Lex Luthor. He's losing himself in the power. He's losing himself in the Omega Sanction. And so ultimately, that's when you switch over to Scott Free and Big Barda, right? Their idea is Lex Luthor needs our help because now he's fighting a war on two fronts. He's fighting this conflict against the Anti-Monitor, which is taking everything he has, but it's also a psychological war, a war for his very essence. And that is not a very easy conflict. And so truth to tell, if this fight goes on too long without Lex Luthor getting any help whatsoever, either he will become the new Darkseid, corrupted by the Omega Sanction, or he will die. One of two possibilities here. And so that's when you switch over to Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman, right? The Trinity going to the aid of Luthor. But one of the things that Superman says is we have to prioritize the Syndicate, and seemingly he was going to continue on and say the Syndicate needs to be our main focus. But Batman's response is no, right? The Syndicate does not have to be our focus. He says they're only concerned about Superwoman. Mobius is the more dangerous threat now. And so that's where Wonder Woman asks, why call the baby a weapon? And Batman says, because of its father. And she asks, who is that? But we don't get a direct answer to it. Instead, you kind of start jumping back and forth between Scott Free and Big Barda, Scott Free talking to Barda and saying, we cannot leave Earth. Now keep in mind, Barda was formerly one of the Furies. We've mentioned that before. She was essentially an agent of Darkseid at one point in time. Her and Scott Free fell in love. They quite literally ran away together, and she abandoned her post as an agent of Darkseid, and has kind of been with Scott Free ever since. This is one of those times where she asks, do you truly believe in the Justice League? And he says, I do, and I need to. I need you here with me, always with me. I love you, Barda, because again, one of the things that I want to reiterate that we've mentioned before, this is not a long-standing alliance between Mr. Miracle and the Justice League. They've never met before. They don't know each other. And so when Big Barda asked the question, do you truly trust these guys? It's basically her asking, you just met them. Do you really believe that this world is worth saving along with them? Because keep in mind, Scott Free and Big Barda are not of the main DC universe. They're of like the New Gods and all that kind of stuff, that whole mythos. They can go to any reality they want to. So it's like, why stay here and save these guys if we don't have to? It's not so much that she's denying his request. It's him saying the Lanterns are doing some damage to that Shadow Army, but they could use some help. Light Ray's disc is gone, but your Mega Rod might help. Barda just kind of looks down in what appears to be a moment of sadness and teleports away. Now, she will become stupendously important here in a little bit. And so with Batman on the Mobius chair, because he knows everything that's going on and he can read people's minds, his ability to read minds is not limited, which is to say, he can read the mind of the Anti-Monitor. And so that's when he says, he's going to fire to your right, Superman. You have an opening, Diana. He's a strategist. Now, what's really awesome about this is that even though it's only momentary, if you were ever a fan of Martian Manhunter and Grant Morrison's JLA, this is what he would do. Martian Manhunter always kind of served as like a telepathic link among all the members of the Justice League. And so if there was some kind of crisis in the world that the other members of the League were not aware of, Martian Manhunter could alert them to that. More so than that, if they were facing off against some massive threat and it required strategy to work together, he's the one that would unify them, right? Wonder Woman on your left, Superman, duck, that kind of a thing, telling them how to fight strategically against a foe that they would normally be unable to defeat on their own. It's pretty amazing. And so that's when Batman chimes into Superman and says, your cellular structure is reacting again, Superman. You need to step back, take a break. And that's where he just says, I have to get rid of it. I have to get rid of this power. The solar energy from Apocalypse has been rotting my cells, poisoning my mind. It's time to let it go. And so he takes all that power and channels it into the Anti-Monitor. And so that's when Batman asks, right, Shazam, the people of Gotham. And Shazam says, everybody's clear, guys, but us. We're the only ones here. And of course, the Justice League are willing to sacrifice their lives to defeat a foe if it's necessary. But at the end of the day, despite this massive discharge of power at the hands of Superman, Mobius stands strong and just says, that hurt, both of us, but mostly you. Why won't you just stay down? And like blasts Superman and sends him flying. And that's when Lex shows up and just says, you should listen to him, Superman. He says, all this time, I've wondered about you, whether you've held your power back or not. Feeling power myself, I believe you have. But why? Because you didn't want to hurt anybody or cross an imaginary ethical or political line that you just made up? Or are you afraid of it? And that's where Superman just tells him, you're projecting. And Lex says, maybe so, maybe not. But then that's where the Flash shows up. Again, he's possessed by Black Racer, an embodiment of death. And he says, you should be afraid. And Lex just asks, why is that, Flash? And the Flash says, I'm trying to help, but it's making me wait. And it sucks to wait. And so Lex asks, wait for what? And that's where Barry says, death is coming. Someone is going to die here today. And so Mobius just comes charging and just says, heir to Darkseid, you will suffer his fate. Look into my eyes and show me how much it hurts. Whisper your regrets, pray, scream, and die. But in that moment, Grail boom tubes back in along with her mom. Keep in mind, in the last video that we did, Grail had taken Steve Trevor and disappeared. We had no clue what it was that she did with him. We just knew that she took the former love interest of Wonder Woman. And so that is when Barry, in seeing all of this, just says, you should run. All of you. Leave now. In that moment, you jump back to Superwoman, right? And she's starting to give birth to this kid. And Grid chimes in and he says, Grail and her mother have returned along with their creature. I'm detecting a fourth entity with them. Its power levels are unclear. And that's where the chair pings to Batman. And that's when House is just like, what is it now? And Batman just says, it's a boy. Superwoman has given birth to her kid. And she just says, now, finally, it's time to play. And she just says, I will say it is. And Wonder Woman's caught off guard. Batman's chair's going absolutely haywire. Things are going nuts, right? Steve Trevor's just standing there, right? Just crackling with energy. And the Anti-Monitor is like yet another human infused with the power of a god. He will die with the others. And so the whole time, Marina, the mother of Grail, just asks, what are you doing? And Grail just says, having fun. And she says, do it, Trevor. And Trevor initially cries out for help to Wonder Woman and just says, help me. And then in that moment, fires off a massive amount of energy and kills Mobius on the spot. He one-shots him. One-shots the Anti-Monitor. My God. And so at that moment, Wonder Woman's just like, the battlefield changes. Mobius is dead. And so Grail's just standing there with Steve, and she says, your boy toy is going to destroy you now, Diana, and he's going to destroy all of you. Because in that moment, the battle shifts, and now it's a fight against Darkseid's daughter. But the plot thickens, because what happens here is Wonder Woman gives us this narrative. She says her name is Grail. She's the daughter of an Amazon and of Darkseid, born on the hidden island of Themyscira the same night I was. Her mother Marina took Grail and escaped the island, raising her in secret with one purpose: to destroy her father. Grail traveled across the multiverse in search of someone capable and willing to go to war with Darkseid. She found a being fused with the anti-life equation, the one thing that Darkseid was vulnerable to. And so Grail and Marina orchestrated a war between the Anti-Monitor and Darkseid here on Earth. Darkseid was annihilated, and the Anti-Monitor was freed from the anti-life equation. In the wake of Darkseid's destruction, reality ruptured, power changed hands. While Grail took the anti-life for herself, my friends, the Justice League, became gods. I believed we would stop the Anti-Monitor until Grail created her own new god and destroyed him herself. Grail's weapon is Steve Trevor. Steve was the first man to ever step foot onto Themyscira. That's going to become important. Keep that in the back of your head. And she says, he brought me back to this world. Together, we've protected it from countless threats, mythological and otherwise. He taught me about the good and the bad in life, and I him. And so that's when Grail sends Steve after everybody, and he's just firing off massive amounts of energy. And he just says, Diana, you have to stop me. He doesn't want to do it. He's being forced to do it. And she says, you can stop this yourself, Steve. The anti-life equation is all about control. Do not let it control you. But ultimately, the entire nature of the anti-life equation is bending other people to your will. It's almost impossible to resist. In fact, very few people can. And so in this moment, the question has to be asked, why even do this at all? Why would Grail, following the death of Darkseid, which was her main motivation, and the death of Mobius, which she just happened to contribute to, why keep going? Why not walk away? And so Batman says that, right? He says, I know why you're doing this, Grail. And she asks why. And he says, you accomplished your mission. Your father is dead. But the Mobius chair says that even though you fulfilled your purpose, you've become intoxicated with power. You want more. Like father, like daughter. You truly are Darkseid's kid. And so Shazam initially tries to jump in, and Grail starts taking the entire Justice League apart piece by piece. Nothing they can do can stop her. When the Green Lanterns come in and put a cage around her, she breaks through it with an axe that was forged by Hades himself. Literally, these guys are powerless. Not only that, it's really more to torment Wonder Woman than anything else. I don't know that I would go so far as to say that Wonder Woman has the life that was stolen by Grail, but on some surface it is, because Grail always kind of felt like she was being used by her mother in order to instigate a war between Darkseid and the Anti-Monitor in order to hopefully destroy Darkseid. And so even in the face of it all, with all the members of the Justice League powerless against Steve Trevor and the anti-life equation, Lex Luthor finally steps in. And Lex Luthor just says, your ex-boyfriend's asking us to end this, Wonder Woman. And that's where Superman says, no, right? This is not how the League works. No matter the stakes, we find a way. And Lex just says, you are as naive as you are foolish, Superman. I have the power of the Omega effect. I will save the world myself again. And so what you do is you switch over to the crime syndicate, because this baby is the key. And when I told you this baby was overpowered, I was not lying. Because when you have Grid talking to Superwoman and addressing the idea of the Anti-Monitor, one of the things he says is, we have to leave. We have to flee this place. But Superwoman says, nonsense. We ran from our Earth power ring, but there is no need to run now. And Owlman just says, she's right? Our salvation is here. Hand over the child. And that's where Superwoman says, because you know whose child it is, Thomas, not yours and not Ultraman's. And that's when she says Shazam backwards. And anyone who's familiar with the crime syndicate knows exactly whose child it is. And she addresses that, right? She says, God of Apocalypse, God of Strength, your powers belong to my baby now. Because in that moment, the powers of Lex Luthor are stripped away, and the powers of Superman are yanked away, at least the God of Strength powers that he had. So Superman's back to his normal self. And Superwoman says, son of Alexander Luthor, inheritor of evil, like his father before him, he is able to absorb all energy, even that of the gods. He will be the most powerful being on Earth in this universe and in any universe, and he will destroy all who stand in our way. And that statement gets cut short because she gets incinerated. She literally just gets crushed. Superwoman dies like that. And Grail is just like blah, blah, blah. She loved to hear herself talk, didn't she, right? She's gone. And so in that moment, Grail, realizing what the baby is, that it is the child of Alexander Luthor from Earth 3, he was a superhero, but had the ability to siphon off the powers of others. She just says, I am going to take this baby and I'm going to use it just like you used me. And so Steve looks and says, Diana, right? And that's where Wonder Woman says, Barry pushes me out of the way. And in that moment, Grail takes the baby and fires it off at Steve Trevor. And Wonder Woman says, but to help me, he has to slow down to do it, enough to be hit. Grail attempts to absorb Flash's God power with the child, but it was not a power that took possession of Barry. It was a sentient entity, the Black Racer. It is separated from Flash, and it is not happy because the Black Racer is now its own thing. And it says, I am not simply energy to be transferred, daughter of Darkseid. And Grail just says, I know what you are, Racer. I also know that you will not leave until someone dies, and you don't care who it is. So what are you waiting for? You have chosen your target, the man who tried to tame death. Touch him so you can go. Kill the Flash. This is a reference to Final Crisis, when Barry Allen returned by outrunning death. That was one of the revelations that we discovered, and it's why I mentioned the difference between Black Racer and the Black Flash when you guys were asking the question. During Final Crisis, we had actually learned that after Crisis on Infinite Earths, when Barry Allen was quote-unquote dead during the original Crisis event, when he re-emerged during Final Crisis, it turned out he had just been outrunning death the entire time. He was supposed to die, but he escaped, and that's why the Black Racer goes after him, because while he's not technically the Black Flash, Barry is not supposed to be alive. And so in that moment, you switch back over to Jessica Cruz and Cyborg, and that's where Victor says, Shazam's distracted them, given me a foothold to hack into. I'm trying to tap into the ring's supernatural technology, see if I can override Volthoom's control over your body. But the programming, it's not just ones and zeros. I'm sorting through. There's a third numerical quantity, a number that only exists inside Volthoom's ring. I can only describe it as fear. And that's where Jessica says, there is no room for fear right now. And so she starts to overcome it. What happens when a person overcomes fear in the face of almost guaranteed death? They can become a Green Lantern. And so that's the cool thing, because Victor says, I think you're helping me bypass it somehow. Whatever you're feeling, Jessica, keep it up, right? Because she's overcoming her fear. It's the transition story for her character. Up until this point, she was governed by fear, riddled by fear, anxiety. The world controlled her. She was a leaf wafting in the wind, left to the whims and wants of whatever happened to be around her. But in this moment, overcoming that fear, telling that anxiety alarm bell in the back of her head to shut the hell up. This allows her to become the superhero that she always felt like she was meant to be. Not in the sense that she becomes a Green Lantern, but in the sense that she retakes control of her body. Because in that moment, when the Racer catches up to Barry and almost kills him, Jessica jumps in the way, and Jessica Cruz dies. She sacrifices herself to save Barry Allen's life, and that's where Death just looks on and says, a life has been taken, others call, and the Black Racer leaves. Now Barry does reach down and touch her, check her pulse, and realize, no, she's actually dead, right? Not only that, when you switch to Lex Luthor, he says, as is the Omega effect, the witch stole my power with that child. And that's where Superman says, show some respect and shut your mouth, Luthor. And that's where Luthor's just kind of like, why? Because the Green Lantern who wasn't is dead? She betrayed us anyway. And there's some clarification that goes on here, right? It was not the child, it was Volthoom. But at the end of the day, the main threat is still Grail. She says, I will put an end to all of this, right? I am Grail, the God Killer. And today, all of you gods die. And that's when the Justice League, along with the other members of the Lantern Corps, at least those who survived against the Anti-Monitor, go rushing into this conflict. And Wonder Woman says, Clark is right. We were never gods. Gods watch the world from above. Gods do not intervene. Gods do not bleed or cry or laugh or love. We struggle. We fight. We fail. And that's where Grail says, the curse of Metron is not something that I want. I do not want the Mobius chair. What is it you humans say? Too much information. Batman has told me something I needed to know. Steve Trevor is not the chosen one. Because the idea here, Batman says, the prophecy Grail followed says the first man who touched foot on Themyscira is the chosen one, whatever that means. But Grail's wrong. That's why Steve is able to resist the anti-life equation. He was not the first. And so that's where Grail says, if that's the case, then let me take the anti-life equation back so that there can be a new birth. And she does exactly that. She siphons the anti-life equation off of Steve Trevor, and in that moment, the baby transforms into Darkseid. And that's where Grail harkens back to a statement she had made to her mother previously where she says, death is too good for Darkseid. But here's the kicker. Darkseid is resurrected through the anti-life equation. Grail controls the anti-life equation, which means the will of Darkseid is bound to Grail. And that's why she says, what are you waiting for? Heed my will, Father. Obey me and incinerate them. And Darkseid does what he's told. He starts firing off on the Justice League, right? And that's kind of nuts because initially it starts throwing everybody off, right? A new Darkseid has risen. And Superman's like, what do we do? And it's just like, we move, right? We get out of here as fast as we can. And that's where Wonder Woman says, everybody attacks in unison. One assault, one last chance. Not only that, Hal Jordan jumps to Bruce Wayne, right? He jumps to Batman. The reason being because all Batman has really been doing is sitting on the Mobius chair. But the reality here is the Mobius chair isn't going to tell them anything they don't already know. There's no real tactical advantage to Batman just sitting on a chair, but Batman cannot drive himself to leave the chair. It's one of the things we talked about in the last video. It's addicting. And so Hal Jordan just says, the universe needs you more than it needs me. When I put the ring on, you put everything you have into getting off that chair. Will it to be possible, Bruce? And so Hal Jordan puts the ring on Bruce Wayne's finger and Batman leaves the chair, but he becomes a Green Lantern. Not only that, in the midst of that, a boom tube opens off to the side and Big Barda returns with the generals of Darkseid. And she says, we will not allow the desecration of our Lord Darkseid. And that's where Grail just says, Barda and the Furies, and my poor stupid brother. Our father is my slave now. And Wonder Woman just says, I watch as Grail stumbles, and so does Darkseid, like a puppet. And so she starts to kind of figure out what's happening here. Wonder Woman is putting the pieces together. And so in that moment, Owlman from the Crime Syndicate jumps onto the Mobius chair, tells Grid to hack into it, and the two of them bail out. We will revisit that because that's where DC Rebirth comes into play. And so in this moment, he just says, it's time for Plan B and teleports out. Wonder Woman says, in a burst of light, the last of the Syndicate vanish. Cyborg stumbles, reboots, then rejoins the League because Victor Stone is back to his normal self. Grid has taken off alongside Owlman. And so that's when she says, we fight together, but nothing slows them down. And so that's when Marina finally walks up to Wonder Woman and says, I thought I taught her better. I thought I taught her to control the dark part, to fight the darkness. But once the war within her starts, it will not stop. Is she the new Darkseid in physical form? No. But is she the new Darkseid in terms of her pursuit of power? Yes, no matter what we do, if we do not kill Grail, she will kill you all. And so that's when Marina goes to fight her mother directly. And that's the crazy thing, is because Wonder Woman says, there's no reason to fight Grail. You are an Amazon. You are my sister. And Grail simply says, I am no one's sister. Not only that, the rest of the Justice League is facing off against Darkseid, and it's pointless, right? Batman says, Diana, the chair, it told me the anti-life equation has the power to control every living being in the universe, or it has the power to control Darkseid. We have to separate it from Darkseid. The power within will be dispersed. It will all shut down, but only Grail can reverse what she has done. Seemingly, she has to choose. So how do you get someone like Grail to choose to give up, to choose to stop? And that is the beauty of Wonder Woman's lasso. Because what ends up happening is she lassos Grail, throws it around her, and then Grail just starts spouting things when that happens. It's too late for me. I am darkness. I am evil. And Wonder Woman just says, you can choose not to be. And Marina approaches her daughter and says, she's right, Grail. I led you down this path. I abandoned the code of the Amazons, and I failed you. But you can stop what you've unleashed. But again, with the lasso bound around her, she says, Mother, I can't be good. It is not who I am. Now, here's the kicker about this, and here's kind of the question to ask. Wonder Woman's lasso of truth does not work on Grail. Or potentially it does, because the revelation of the lasso being something that Grail could overcome didn't come until Greg Rucka's run, specifically during DC Rebirth. So honestly, in hindsight, this moment can be interpreted in a couple different ways, because what ends up happening is when she says, Mother, I can't be good, it's not who I am, is she speaking the truth, or is that how she genuinely feels? And so that's where her mother says, then do evil. Open your eyes. That's what will end this. A sacrifice to ease your rage. And she just says, Mother, no. But Marina says, open them, Grail. Unleash it upon me. Let it flow through me. And know how much I truly love you. Now, my child. And Grail does exactly that. She fires off a shot through her mother. And Wonder Woman says, Grail's beams go through her mother and then they strike Darkseid. The anti-life and Darkseid separate. And before we can act, the equation itself fights back. And then they are gone. Grail, Darkseid, the anti-life equation. I hear Grail's cries echo long after she is no more, right? Steve Trevor has reverted back to himself, but Marina is still there. And she says, Diana, I have to tell you. She says, Marina whispers a story in my ear, one that I can't and I don't know how to believe. And she says, I thought we lost Jessica too, but Jessica's life was not the life taken by the Black Racer. Volthoom's was. And so in that moment, because Jessica is unconscious and because she faced her fear, a Green Lantern ring appears. Jessica Cruz of Earth, you have the ability to overcome great fear. You have been chosen. Welcome to the Green Lantern Corps. So Jessica Cruz officially becomes a Green Lantern, one of the best parts of her character arc in the story. Not only that, Wonder Woman continues on, right? No one can explain it, not Hal or John. They don't question why Jessica's worthy, but they do ask why the ring thinks this sector needs yet another lantern, which is a fair question to ask. But the pieces kind of continue on, right? Grail has survived, and she's just out there in a cave somewhere, and she says, no more wars. Father, this is your second chance, and mine. With the power shed, you are a child again. As my mother raised me, I will raise you. I will finally learn to love you. I swear it. So seemingly, she's raising her child with a different perspective than the one that she was raised with, that Darkseid would potentially become a good guy. Lex Luthor travels back to Apokolips and basically takes on a Superman suit, the one that we saw during Rebirth, as dope as it was, and basically decides to be a person to bring in an Age of Revelation, a new age, on Apokolips. Batman goes back to the Batcave and tells Hal Jordan what he learned from the Mobius chair, which is that there are 3 Jokers, not simply just one. But the big takeaway behind all of this is twofold. The first is that when Marina told Wonder Woman this story that Wonder Woman didn't know about, it was that Wonder Woman actually had a twin brother that she never knew existed. Not only that, when you jump to the moon and you pick up with Owlman and Metron, right, how all this started in the first place, that grid, right, the personality that took over Cyborg is just kind of confined to the chair. But Owlman and Metron are having a conversation, and that's where Metron says, I appreciate the freedom, Owlman, and now that I've taught you how to access the Mobius chair properly, I presume that we are finished here. And he says, but a warning, do not seek too many answers. Your mind, and presumably he would say your mind can't handle it, Owlman cuts him off and says, is stronger than Batman's. I can process it all. So tell me everything, chair. Tell me all the secrets of the universe. But there were certain secrets he wasn't meant to know. Because in that moment, a blue source of energy appears out of nowhere, and Owlman is incinerated on the spot. And as most of you guys probably know by now, that was Dr. Manhattan. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. This goes directly into DC Rebirth, when DC effectively soft reboots the entirety of their continuity. And I gotta tell you, man, DC Universe Rebirth was the best thing coming out of DC Rebirth. The best thing coming out of DC Rebirth. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.